Chapter 706, That Man. Turning his body to the side, Elland avoided a bulldozing drunkard. While swatting his clothes with a frown, he continued jostling towards the bar counter. During this process, he didn't seem to be doing anything, but the surrounding customers would always fail to touch him. Be it in terms of speed, agility, or his balance and coordination, he had reached a rather terrifying level. Finally, Elland arrived at the bar counter as he rapped the wooden counter.
"Where's Ian?"
The bartender glanced at him. Without a word, he kept his head low and wiped his glass cups. Elland stood there in surprise, wondering if he had done something wrong that earned him nothing. This angered him a little as he wished to reach out and yank the bartender out. However, he believed that such acts were lacking as a gentleman. He forcefully held down his emotions and looked around and discovered that everyone was drinking. With a thought, Elland experimented by saying,
"A cup of Ormur red wine."
The bartender's actions paused as he looked up and gave the handsome, black-haired, red-eyed man an odd look.
"We don't have that available."
This was the finest red wine in the world. The price was staggering. Elland wasn't dumb, and he could tell from the bartender's eyes that he had ordered something he shouldn't have. On careful thought, he said,
"1 glass of Southville beer."
5 pence.
The bartender finally lowered the cup and cloth. Elland took out a 1 soldi note and said,
"Keep the change."
Thank you.
The bartender pointed left and said,
Ian is in card room 1.
Elland immediately smiled, feeling happy and proud that he had resolved an actual problem. He didn't take the cup of Southville beer and, instead, turned around and walked straight to card room 1. Knock, knock, knock. He politely knocked on the door. A rather adolescent voice sounded,
"Please come on in."
Elland adjusted his collar and pushed open the door, only to realize that the scene inside was unlike what he had expected. He believed that, since it was a card room, there would be a bunch of people surrounding a long table, playing games like Texas. But to his surprise, there were indeed about 8 people, but there weren't any poker cards. A piece of paper was placed in front of every participant as they seemed to be recording something. Apart from that, there were only fountain pens and multi-faced dice on the table. Elland instinctively cast his gaze on the youngest person inside. It was similarly a handsome boy with red eyes. He looked about 16.
"Ian?"
Elland asked. Ian nodded with a smile.
"That's me. Sir, is there something I can help you with? Or do you wish to join our game?"
"Game?"
Elland returned with a question. Ian chuckled.
"Yes, game. I don't enjoy playing cards or billiards, but something needs to be done when spending the whole day here. I gained some inspiration from Emperor Rozel's biography. It's to organize a few people to sit down and attempt a tabletop adventure. In this game, as long as you abide by the rules, you can be anyone: a doctor, an adventurer who loves eating vegetables, a private detective who always carries a wrench and pipe, or an adventurer who enjoys radical ideas. Together, they can head to some ancient castle and seek out the history hidden within, battling all kinds of monsters along the way."
Sounds a little interesting.
Elland had a feeling that this game suited him well.
Haha, do you want to join? We're currently embroiled in a ploy and are facing a powerful ancient vampire. He appears to have a handsome face, but beneath his skin are boils, formed from his boiling blood.
Sanguine, thank you very much.
Elland's expression twitched indiscernibly, as he directly said,
"I have a mission for you."
All right, let's go to the room next door.
Ian took his round hat and old satchel and stood up. The billiard room next door had no one in it. The boy closed the door with great familiarity as he surveyed the area, before looking at Elland.
"Sir, I do not know you. Might I know who introduced you?"
Elland lifted his chin and smiled.
"Sherlock Moriarty."
Just as he said that, he suddenly looked left and right as he raised his hand to pinch his nose.
"So it's Detective Moriarty."
Ian heaved a sigh of relief without hiding it.
I'm assured then. By the way, didn't he go on vacation to Desi Bay? When will he be back?
Emlyn lowered his right hand as he said, without a change in expression.
He isn't back yet. I've been to his rented apartment. To be frank, a normal vacation should have ended by the end of January. It's already April.
Could it be that something happened to him?
Ian asked worriedly. Emlyn recalled the powers and mysteriousness which Sherlock Moriarty presented as he shook his head.
Perhaps he's caught up in a complicated case.
Ian didn't speak further as he asked,
How may I address you? What mission do you have?
You can call me Mr. White.
Emlyn took out a piece of paper that resembled a bounty notice.
Help me find these 5 people.
Ian received it and carefully flipped through it for a while.
£20 for an effective clue. £150 for an exact location. Is that acceptable?
No problem.
Emlyn felt that the price was just too cheap. Compared to this, the prices seen at the Tarot Club were way more exaggerated. Cha. Ian folded the piece of paper and said,
Mr. White, how do I contact you if I have any clues?
South of the bridge, Harvest Church.
Emlyn had already thought of the answer. Upon hearing that, Ian gave him an odd look.
You're a believer of Earth Mother. That's rare in Backland.
I'm not.
Emlyn firmly shook his head.
I'm only doing volunteer work over there.
Without waiting for Ian to speak, he asked,
How did you inherit those red eyes?
This was something he had wished to ask when he first saw Ian. This was because red eyes were a trademark characteristic of Sanguine in ancient times. However, there was a long period of time when humans in Sanguine copulated in the 4th epoch. They were all residents of an empire, hence, with the widespread fellowship, many descendants were produced. There was an increasing number of red-eyed mixed bloods as they passed down their genes, becoming an uncommon eye color for humans. To put it simply, every red-eyed human had a Sanguine ancestor. Ian replied in surprise,
My father. I've no idea how much further up the family tree, as I was a vagabond.
From the looks of it, he isn't connected to the Sanguine.
Emlyn handed over a £20 deposit, feeling somewhat disappointed before turning to leave the billiard room. After he left, Ian didn't immediately return to the card room. Instead, he closed the door and said into the air,
Detective Moriarty hasn't returned to Backland. I'm a little worried about him.
A figure suddenly appeared in the billiard room. She had a pale face with exquisite features while wearing a black bonnet. Dressed in a black Gothic regal dress, she was none other than Wraith Sharon.
He's doing fine?
Sharon replied, without any perturbation in her tone. Her figure dematerialized before vanishing.
You always says the same thing. Don't tell me that you've always been in contact with Detective Moriarty.
Ian picked up a newspaper in the corner of the billiard room. Placed on it was the Tussock Times, and beneath it was News at Sea. The latter was mainly used to report the situations of the different colonies of the Lowen Kingdom and matters at sea, but due to technological restrictions, the news at sea that reached Backland was severely outdated. It wasn't of much use to people who needed it, so subscription numbers were low and the business was floundering. Later, with a suggestion from a new chief editor, the newspaper's style changed. It had more rumors out at sea, as well as all sorts of strange matters revolving pirates and adventurers. It appeared more like stories rather than actual news reports. To people's surprise, this change in style was welcomed. As it involved ghosts, specters, sea monsters, and treasures, it became the semi-literate people's prime choice to flaunt their knowledge to the illiterate at the various bars. After all, although the stories seemed fake, they were sufficiently interesting. Ian casually flipped through the newspapers without finding any content of interest. He only had a deep impression on one of the reports in News at Sea. According to our correspondent, on the night of the 25th March, the King of Immortality fleet attacked a ship heading from East Balaam to Fasak and plundered all its goods and money. And living up to his title, Slaughterer Kirkeyes finished a bloody massacre.
These pirates are really preposterous.
Ian shook his head and lowered the newspapers. He returned to the card room and continued his game. Outside the bar, Elland boarded a carriage and leaned onto the carriage wall as he watched the street lamps move past him. He pinched his nose again and silently muttered,
A wraith? This arms dealer sure is resourceful. Not bad.
Elland closed his eyes as he felt more hopeful about his entrusted mission. The sunlight shone in from outside, dyeing the captain's cabin golden. Edwina sat on a chair with a book in hand as she looked opposite her.
So you also believe that the Solomon, Trunsoist, and Tudor empires all coexisted?
This is a necessary condition for the War of the Four Emperors.
Klein simply replied. He held a book titled Book of the Three Worlds. It originated from a Life School of Thought member before it landed in Vice Admiral Iceberg's hands. It described the material world, the spirit world, and the world beyond rationality. It included some information on charms, with rather profound parts. Klein was seriously reading information on this in a bid to better use the Sea God Scepter and the Worm of Time. Klein had actually discovered that the books collected by Vice Admiral Iceberg were various ancient texts that were rather unsystematic. This was quite different from the characteristics of the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, which backed her. Therefore, he guessed that the internal, orthodox, systematic mysticism knowledge of the Church was not public. Edwina was just about to ask again when she suddenly realized the Golden Dream's cruising speed gradually drop. She looked out the window and, after a few looks, said crisply,
We've arrived in Byam.
Chapter 707, Danitz's Request. We've reached Byam? Klein stood up upon hearing that and looked out. He saw the familiar Resistance's private harbor. He didn't show his surprise as he commented calmly.
Faster than I expected.
It was 3 hours faster than he had expected.
It's faster than I expected as well.
Edwina looked away and agreed with Gearman Sparrow.
However, these are all unimportant details.
Klein lowered his head, pretending as though he was browsing through the rest of the Book of the Three Worlds. He then handed it to Vice Admiral Iceberg.
That marks the end of this discussion.
Edwina looked at the book in silence. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She reached for the Book of the Three Worlds and placed it on the table in passing. Following that, she got up and bowed.
I look forward to future discussions with you. Your expertise in ancient history is admirable.
If Klein had been acting as himself, he would have said a few words of humility while praising Vice Admiral Iceberg for her breadth of knowledge. Unfortunately, he was the crazy adventurer, Gearman Sparrow. All he did was nod and say,
We are collaborators.
It meant that there would be opportunities in the future. He didn't speak further as he left the captain's cabin and returned to his room. He packed his suitcase with a relaxed mind, waited for the Golden Dream to dock, and then headed straight for the deck. At that moment, there were many crew members gathered on the deck. It included gourmet Brew Walls, singer Orpheus, and flowery bow-tie Jodison, most of the crew who were upper echelon members of the pirate crew with their heads worth a handsome bounty. They gave sincere smiles as they happily kept waving at Klein. Among them, Beryl and Iron Skin were filled with excitement as they belted out a song for their departing guest.
When did I have such a good relationship with them?
Klein lampooned as he walked past the pirates until he arrived at the gangway. Monceau, Anderson Hood was there with his hair combed, his clothes neat and tidy. He said with a laugh,
They probably mean to say goodbye. Or should I say, let's hope we don't meet again. Gearman, do you know how dangerous a situation you were in? You nearly became the public enemy of every crew member. They were so eager to steer the Golden Dream to Byam in 5 minutes.
Klein was just about to answer when he saw Danitz jog over with a black cloak draped over him.
This fellow has really resolved himself to do better, and he plans to leave the Golden Dream to go at it alone. This is a little incompatible with my plans. Only by being around Vice Admiral Iceberg and the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom would his value as a believer of the fool, be accentuated. However, it doesn't matter. If Danitz can grow stronger, it will be even more meaningful.
Klein habitually measured the pros and cons before ignoring his other thoughts. He looked at Danitz in silence and waited for him to speak. Danitz opened his mouth with a serious expression, but nothing came out of it. All he did was give a hollow chuckle and say to Anderson,
"Do you have the potion formula for Conspirer?"
Yes,
Anderson said with a chuckle.
but I have no plans on selling it to you.
Danitz's expression darkened as Anderson continued, unfazed.
What's the point of obtaining the Conspirer potion formula now? Any attempts to advance now will only result in failure. Pal, it's best you redo your acting as a hunter, followed by a provoker, and then a pyromaniac. Heh, it's best that you get an artisan to make that giant's heart into a defensive mystical item. Otherwise, I'm afraid you would be killed by others when the time comes. After you're sure about your chances, get the Conspirer potion formula from your captain. She has it. However, I believe that will be the end for you. Heh, Conspirer has very high requirements.
Danitz's face twitched as he was being mocked, but he remembered every word Anderson told him. This was because the man before him had the title of Strongest Hunter, who had rich experience on this pathway. Furthermore, he had a vague idea that the key was acting. He suspected that the captain's guidance from before was directed at this, just that it was rather vague.
"There will come a day when I'll let you know what a true Conspirer is,"
Danitz stubbornly retorted before looking at German Sparrow. Chaftab pas. Chaftab pachi life. He cleared his throat as he said without daring to look into his eyes,
"I've already made the request with Captain. In the future I'll be in contact with the Resistance, and I'll often be in Byam."
It means you don't wish to leave the golden dream, but you will find opportunities to hone yourself? Heh, why does it feel like you're reporting to your boss?
Klein chuckled inwardly as he gave a terse answer. Danitz was instantly relieved as he felt a lot better. If it wasn't because his companions were watching behind him, he would have diligently helped German Sparrow carry his suitcase and send him all the way to the dock. After watching German and Anderson leave, he cautiously decided to pray to the Fool every day starting tonight. He wanted to show his devotion to prevent any accidents from happening to him. Inside the Resistance's private harbor, Anderson watched as German Sparrow circled into another newly built road before walking out of the woods via the shortest distance.
You seem familiar with this place? This road wasn't here the last time I was here,
Anderson said, partially bored and poignant.
Of course, there are so many people praying to me every day telling me what they've done, and I occasionally give them a response, such as directing them to mend this road.
Klein thought smugly but replied with a stoic expression.
Where does your friend stay?
in a manor in the Byam city outskirts.
Anderson sped up his pace as he led the way. An hour later, he brought Klein to a manor. There was an eclectic smell from various spices, mixed with an indescribable ersatz exoticism. After informing the gatekeeper of their intentions, the two didn't wait long before they saw a man of medium-sized build of less than 1.75 meters walk over. By his side were his butler and valet. The man's skin was somewhat sallow, with quite a tan. His contours were gentle, but his eye sockets were much more recessed than most Loanese. To Klein, he could basically determine the man's background. He was a Highlander from the Fainapotter kingdom. The man was already a little plump, with a rotund, amiable face. He immediately laughed when he saw the strongest hunter.
Anderson, you aren't dead yet.
I'm waiting to attend your funeral.
Anderson replied without standing on ceremony. He then turned sideways to Klein.
Ukva Kanakris, the doctor of my former team.
He didn't introduce German Sparrow to Ukva and said with a grin,
I've brought you business.
Ukva instantly understood Anderson and didn't ask in front of his butler and valet. He led the duo towards the main building in the manor. Along the way, Klein saw buildings like windmills, bakery, brewery, and militia training grounds. The entire manor appeared like a miniaturized kingdom. Apart from the lack of a blacksmith, it was completely self-sufficient. Most iron products were cheaper buying them from the city than personally making them.
This is the pastoral lifestyle.
Klein sighed silently as he followed Ukva into the house and to his study. Ukva didn't call the mistress of the house over, nor did he carry his child to meet Anderson and Klein. Clearly, he didn't wish for them to have any contact with the mysterious world. Hence, after he closed the door, he went straight to the point.
What's the business?
Didn't you wish to sell that revolver? He has intentions on buying it.
Anderson pointed at Klein.
German Sparrow.
German Sparrow? The powerful adventurer who easily hunted Wormtongue Mythor?
Ukva said in surprise, but he didn't show any fear. Although he had distanced himself from the adventuring lifestyle, he knew that he couldn't be careless. Therefore, while in Bayam, he would proactively keep himself informed to prevent trouble from happening. Anderson scoffed when he heard that.
That's old news. This gentleman's achievements include successfully hunting slaughterer Kirchis while living to this day.
Kirchis? The second mate of the King of Immortality?
Ukva's expression changed. He couldn't hide his horror as he secretly turned wary.
That's right.
Anderson said with a self-deprecating smile.
In the Pirates' playground, he's the one who's recognized as the strongest hunter.
Ukva gulped as he looked at Klein. He couldn't help but smile and say,
I believe you have the ability to buy Death Knell.
Death Knell?
Klein asked with piqued interest, but he didn't show it.
That's the name of the revolver. It has accompanied me for a decade. Sigh, if it's not because it overlaps in functionality with one of my other mystical items, and isn't of much use for me at present, I wouldn't be willing to sell it.
Ukva replied with a sigh. At that moment, Anderson tsked with laughter.
That wasn't what you said before. You said you preferred farming tools.
A planter.
Klein made the corresponding judgment based on Anderson's words and Ukva's expression. Meanwhile, the corresponding potion names flashed through his mind. Sequence 9 Planter, Sequence 8 Doctor with the ancient name Healing Pastor, and Sequence 7 Harvest Priest.
It's no wonder Anderson introduced him as his former team's doctor.
Klein thought for a moment and said,
Do you know Frank Lee?
Ha ha! No. Although I'm from Faina Potter, my formula and ingredients were obtained by myself, one at a time. I had nothing to do with the Church of Earth Mother. Therefore, I wouldn't dare to return to Faina Potter. However, I've heard of Frank Lee. He's someone who gives the church quite a headache.
Ukva replied frankly.
He's only a Sequence 6 biologist, but he's given such importance by the church I really do wish to meet him if there's a chance.
No, you won't. You will regret having that thought.
Klein could tell from Ukva's answer that he believed in Earth Mother and was likely a powerful Sequence 5 beyonder. By his side, Anderson's face twitched when he heard Ukva. He said with lingering fear,
That guy does give one a headache. In a certain sense, you can call him a devil. His powers and thoughts have exceeded the level of a Sequence 6. All right, let's not talk about him. Whenever his name pops up, I still remember the milk that was jettisoned.
Ukva looked at the duo in puzzlement as he restrained his looks of curiosity. He walked to the table side, opened a drawer, and pulled out an iron-black revolver that looked a little longer than an ordinary revolver.
This is Death Knell.
Ukva introduced it solemnly. Chapter 708, Revolver Worth 9,000 Pounds. Don't tell me that this matter was targeted at me? Klein was alarmed.
It really is possible, he thought. I need to be careful.
Klein controlled his facial expressions as he went forward without any anticipation or excitement on his face. He reached out to receive the iron-black revolver with a slightly long barrel. He was originally very worried that Ukva, male, would raise the price if he showed any strong desires for it. This was common in any transaction. But on second thought, with German Sparrow's reputation, and with Anderson, male, the strongest hunter of the Fog Sea, as a witness, It was unlikely that Ukfa Connorchris, male, would offend him, despite possibly being a Sequence 5 Beyonder. After all, he had quite the adventuring circles and had hoped to lead a quiet and settled life. He definitely had reservations that the crazy adventurer might sneak into the manor in the middle of the night, despite not flaring up in front of him. Therefore, his attempts to maintain his calm and composed attitude became one of simply maintaining his persona. Realizing that Gehrman Sparrow was seriously inspecting and studying Death Knell, Ukfa, male, gave a detailed introduction.
Its powers are rather uniform: to reap the lives of others. There are 3 methods. First is weakness attack. There's no need to meet any conditions. Just directly inject your spirituality and pull the trigger. It will allow you to discover the target's weaknesses from a mysticism angle. In other words, it would be the aspects where defenses are weaker, and it will provide you with the corresponding accuracy, thus resulting in extraordinarily terrifying damage. The second is lethal attack. You have to cock the hammer before shooting. Its distinguishing feature is that wherever you hit the target, it will be equivalent to an attack on their weak spot. And if you really do strike the true weak spot, it will be capable of dealing a lethal blow to an enemy without overly strong defenses. To targets who are good at defending, 3 shots would be able to resolve the matter. This includes Guardian. Of course, that is under the premise that the 3 lethal blows aren't spread too far apart. It's best not to exceed 5 seconds. The third is slaughtering. On the foundation of a weakness attack, providing more than twice the spirituality on top of that will imbue ordinary bullets with grapeshot effects. Simultaneously, when aimed at a group of enemies, it will result in area of effect damage. To increase the damage, it will need to meet the conditions for lethal attack, as well as provide more than thrice the spirituality. This drain will be quite a burden on the user. It can also be combined with bullets with different characteristics, allowing you to target different kinds of enemies.
This sounds like it corresponds to a Sequence 5 Reaper of the Hunter pathway.
Klein glanced at Anderson, male, and asked, seemingly in thought,
If the target's physical condition reaches that of a Sequence 4 dragon, how many strikes of lethal attack will kill it?
Ukfa, male, was taken aback as he shook his head in a daze.
I've never met a dragon before, much less a dragon whose physical condition has reached that of a demigod. Does Gehrman Sparrow plan on using this gun to slay dragons? And a demigod dragon at that? Isn't that way too crazy?
Ukfa, male, suddenly felt that the adventurers these days were completely different from the ones he met back when he was active. He didn't even consider the possibility of death. Anderson, male, coughed before clearing his throat.
That will depend on your luck. For real, trust me, luck is extremely important. If you encounter a dragon that has been beaten to a state close to death, then 1 shot would be sufficient. Otherwise, I suggest you to run. Yes, it's more important to stay alive. Of course, if the demigod dragon doesn't defend and stays there for you hit it, 5 shots of lethal attack should be enough to kill it.
Ukfa, male, looked at Anderson, male, before looking at Gehrman Sparrow. He decided not to pursue the topic as he changed topics.
Anderson male has told you about the negative effects of Death Knell, right? You will receive a weakness that originally didn't exist, or it will enhance an already existing weakness, making it become more extreme. This effect will be maintained for 6 hours. There was once a time when I became extremely afraid of cats. There was one when I had just hunted a famous pirate, but I ended up going limp in the legs in front of a newborn kitten. I knelt before it, wailing and crying for it to spare me. If you carry it around, the problems aren't great. It will only make you easily thirsty. Just drinking more water and heading to the washroom more often would solve the problem.
Why does it feel like the negative effects of an additional weakness will bring me more trouble? However, it is something acceptable.
Klein deliberated and said,
Name your price.
£9,000. Anderson male should have mentioned it. That's my bottom line.
Ukfa, male, looked at Death Knell in Gehrman Sparrow's hands and said,
This is already cheap enough. If it wasn't because I was worried that getting to know more Beyonders would affect my present life, I would have actively promoted it. I'm sure I can sell it for £12,000.
Indeed, A mystical item at this level can be sold for sky-high prices if the negative effects aren't too serious when meeting a suitable buyer. Normally speaking, £10,000 to £12,000 is a reasonable price.
Although Klein had the intention of bargaining, the price was already low enough that he felt embarrassed to try and take advantage of him. With a terse acknowledgement, he said,
"I'll give it a run. I'll complete the deal if there aren't any problems."
Of course, he didn't really try the gun, as it would give him a weakness for nothing. His method for inspection was to use his spirituality to probe the gun, along with testing for the credibility of Ukva's male words via divination. He did it rather openly without minding Ukva's male and Anderson's male gazes.
I'll make confirmation later above the gray fog. However, Ukva, male, likely doesn't dare to lie to me. He's definitely afraid of a crazy adventurer seeking revenge on him. After all, he has already obtained a settled and quiet life. He has a wife and children.
Klein placed Death Knell on the table, lifted his suitcase, and took out £9,000 from it. The money had been removed from above the gray fog to air it ahead of time. After Ukva, male, received the money, he did a quick count and confirmed the authenticity of the money.
As expected of a recently famous adventurer, few people can produce £9,000 in cash at once. Even a tycoon doesn't have that much liquidity,
he said poignantly as he put away the stacks of cash.
I even spent £5,000 to buy a key not long ago.
Klein felt his heart suddenly turn empty as he saw the £9,000 enter Ukva's mail drawer.
I've been out at sea for so long, saving up so much money, but in just moments, it's all gone. Now, I'm left with £2,683 and 6 gold coins. I can't even afford a relatively decent manor.
Klein sighed as he took out the ordinary revolver from his underarm holster, removed the bullets inside, and stuffed them into Death Knell. After Anderson, male, watched the entire transaction, he said with a TSK,
Ukva, male, you've changed. In the past, you would have checked the authenticity of each note. If you find it troublesome, I can help you.
It's totally fine, but I'm worried that German will shoot you.
Ukva, male, clearly knew the strongest hunter's talent at provocation. He could imagine the scene of Anderson, male, posing in a way that was begging to be beaten, counting each and every note while verifying them against the light in slow motion.
Well said.
Klein silently praised him. He then stuffed the iron-black, long-barreled revolver into his underarm holster. The original revolver was thrown inside the suitcase.
Thanks to you, I no longer have to fret over this matter.
Ukva, male, said with a smile as he pointed at the door.
I'll get my valet to send you out.
Anderson, male, opened his mouth as he chuckled.
Ukva, male, aren't you going to keep us here for dinner?
When you're married with kids, I'll treat you to the best food at the best restaurant.
Ukva, male, said with a smile, completely unfazed by his accusation. Out of the manor, Anderson, male, looked up with squinted eyes. At the sight of the setting sun, he chuckled.
Back when I knew Ukva, male, he was a doctor who was good at planting all kinds of strange plants on the ship to improve everyone's lives. I thought he would die early on during our adventures, but to my surprise, he was always lucky. He even became a druid later.
Why are your poignant words also so deserving of a beating?
Klein deliberately said.
He does have good luck. As your companion, luck is needed to survive.
Anderson, male, surprised, turned his head in surprise as he scrutinized Gehrman's sparrow.
You know how to mock others? Or have you been infected by me?
He wasn't too affected by it as he straightened his clothes, took off his hat, and said with a smile,
All right, you've gotten the mystical item you need. If there's nothing else, it's time I embark on my own journey.
Don't forget that demigod's mission.
Klein succeeded in using a single sentence to crumple Anderson's male expression.
I already have an urge that compels me to finish that matter as soon as possible. All right, there's no need for goodbyes. Perhaps we might really meet again one day.
Anderson, male, gave a self-deprecating laugh, waved the hat in his hand, and turned to head towards another path that left to Byam. As he watched the strongest hunter depart, Klein slowly heaved a sigh. Holding his suitcase, he followed the path he took to get here and headed for Byam under the red evening sky and the shelter of unique palm trees. Hawes, inside Byam City. After finding an ordinary inn to stay in, Klein began considering his subsequent plans.
I'm finally free. I can attempt to act as a marionettist. I have to figure out the corresponding principles. That's the most pressing issue for now. Yes, marionettist. The focus should be on the marionette. I haven't actually created a marionette and controlled it in battle. I should start from there. This matter can be completed before returning to Backland. Not only do Beyonders have to stay hidden there, making it difficult to encounter one, but no matter what one does, it's easy to get on the bad side of the church or some important figure. I need to be careful. It's not a good place to select and create marionettes. The sea is better. I'll go make my rounds at the bar later. I'll find a pirate who deserves death to give it a try.
With this in mind, Klein immediately got up and left his room. As though he was bringing his certificate of deposit to a bank to withdraw the money, he headed for the nearby seaweed bar. Famous pirates often showed up there. Soon he arrived at the bar's entrance. After straightening his clothes, he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Gazes subconsciously swept past his face before they moved away, as though it wasn't anything extraordinary. Following that, someone shouted with a suppressed voice, "German Sparrow!" In a blink of an eye, several figures in the bar ran for the back door. Before Klein could figure out what was happening, the bar was left relatively desolate and empty. Chapter 709, Elland's Warning. As Klein looked at the bar, which was so silent that he could hear breathing, he was taken aback. Only then did he step in and walk straight to the bar counter as though nothing had happened. He thought in frustration, just short of face-palming.
I should change my appearance the next time I come.
Ukva's lack of awareness that German Sparrow had successfully hunted Slaughterer Kerkis had made Klein believe that the latest news hadn't reached the city of generosity, and he boldly came to the seaweed bar. To his surprise, the problem lay in Ukva, who had kept a distance from the adventurer circles. He was a little behind on the news, and the crazy adventurer's infamy had already spread amongst the pirates around the Rorstead archipelago. Sighing silently, Klein sat in front of the bar counter and rapped the wooden counter.
1 glass of Southville beer.
The bartender gulped his saliva with great difficulty.
6 pence.
Klein took out a few copper pence and placed it in front of him. Without a change in expression, he asked,
Any developments recently?
The bartender took the money and carefully delivered the beer to German Sparrow. Then he forced a smile and said,
Admiral Emerius Revolver has been transferred back to Backland. Admiral Robert Davis has replaced him, becoming the highest-ranking naval commander of the surrounding waters for the kingdom. The archipelago's situation is a little tense, and many pirate crews have sent people to gather intelligence.
Admiral Emerius was ultimately implicated by his brother and lost his post. However, as long as he wasn't directly involved, it can't get worse for him when considering his status as a demigod. At the very least, he can maintain the treatment he receives as an admiral. Nothing will happen to his family either. Once the matter blows over, he might still have a chance of being a high-ranking member of the Navy.
Klein gulped down the beer and asked in passing,
Which family is Robert Davis from?
No, he's not a noble. He's one of the rare officers who slowly rose up the ranks to admiral. In the Berserk Sea, Sonia Island and East Balaam, he has rendered plenty of meritorious services.
The bartender recalled the commendations the papers recently had for Admiral Robert Davis. After a pause, he said,
However, I heard that he has received the sponsorship of many nobles.
Yes, with the Imperial Navy, admirals who are from the royal family or aristocrats or have close ties with them take up at least 80%. The remaining 20% are mainly rear admirals and vice admirals.
Klein had long learned of the situation from the documents he received from Emerius Revolver. Compared to this, the army was a lot better. German Sparrow didn't continue asking as he seemed to focus on his drinking. The bartender then added,
In the past 2 to 3 months, the resistance has been very active. They've been constantly attempting to destroy railways or set up blockades on public roads. They've given the Governor-General's office quite a headache, forcing it to dispatch large numbers of soldiers to maintain a smooth flow of traffic. However, the resistance army seldom clashes with them head-on.
I'm aware of that. It's all going according to my plans. In a place where the natives and mixed bloods take up 80%, it's not difficult for the resistance to gather accurate intelligence. Coupled with external sponsors, it wouldn't be hard for them to live on for short periods of time. The reason why they were in a dire situation in the past was all because Kalvetsua was an irrational sea serpent. It often got them to attack key nodes in a city, fighting head-on with the Lowen Kingdom's navy and army.
Klein mumbled to himself in delight as he drank another mouthful of beer. He had also warned the resistance to not be overly active. If they forced the Governor-General's office into a corner, the Lowen Kingdom might send Sequence 5 Beyonders, or even demigods who were good at pursuit and tracking. With the Resistance's strength, there was no way they could put up a fight. In the name of Sea God, Klein's instructions were to maintain, while slightly improving their present situation, and await for the global situation to change. This wasn't too far off. According to the various matters Miss Justice had feedback on, and with the Hanged Man giving insight that affirmed this, it was certain that once the Lowen Kingdom was done with its internal reforms and making the original and newly added ironclad warship become its main force in combat, a war against the southern continent's colonies was inevitable. He silently drank his beer until the bartender was done. He then wore his hat, got up, and left the bar, heading straight for his inn. Along the way, he saw bronze-skinned children with curly hair and natives with brown jackets and pantaloons. These people either made way in horror without even looking up, or they were hunched in a corner, looking at Klein with a complicated look in their eyes. Klein helplessly curved the ends of his lips as he silently returned to his room. Moose, us people abaya hekamanai. He didn't immediately change his appearance and head to the various bars to seek out pirates. This was because he was certain that they would hide the entire night and not appear again. Just as Klein was planning to enter Grozel's travels to explore it, there was a knock on his door. Without needing to ask, all he did was grip the knob when the visitor's appearance naturally surfaced in his mind. It was a middle-aged man dressed in a dark red coat and white slacks. He wore a ship-shaped hat. The corners of his eyes and mouth, as well as his forehead, had clear wrinkles. He was none other than the captain of the White Agate, military personnel, just Elland.
Impressive. News of me appearing in Bayam just spread, and he managed to find where I'm staying. Of course, it's because I didn't attempt to hide myself. I directly used my identification documents to check in.
Klein turned the knob and pulled open the door. He politely greeted him.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm very glad to see you back in Bayam.
Elland took off his hat and entered the room without any reservations.
Is there something?
Klein pulled a chair over and sat down. Elland sat opposite him and chuckled.
Isn't visiting a friend the most important matter?
You're such a smooth talker. Too bad Anderson is gone, or he can learn from you.
Klein felt triggered for some reason. He maintained his usual state and looked into Elland's eyes.
All right, you've made your visit.
Elland seemed to have expected such a response. He smiled and said,
Do you still remember Donna?
Of course, she and her brother are adorable. I wonder if they've recovered from the fright I gave them the last time and have given up any curiosity towards the mysterious world.
Klein calmly replied,
I don't have amnesia.
Forgetting unimportant matters aids our mental health. Heh, this isn't said by Emperor Roselle.
Elland simply explained,
Didn't you tell Donna's father that he should post an advertisement in the Sonia Morning Post for 3 days in a row asking to buy Demir's special cured meat if he needs your help? He did so recently, but unfortunately, you weren't in Bayam or the nearby seas.
What happened after that?
Klein's instincts told him that Donna and her family weren't in serious trouble based on Elland's relaxed attitude. Dine. Elland chuckled and said,
I heard your conversation back then, and after discovering the advertisement, I visited them using the address. As you know, Donna is a lovely lady. She reminds me of my daughter. The matter isn't too complicated. Erdi, who's Donna's father, had a bunch of valuable goods plundered by the crazy captain. This plunged him into a terrible economic situation. Although it isn't as bad as going bankrupt, life for him has definitely turned for the worse. That's why he wishes to commission you to get the goods back. I knew you weren't in Bayam back then, so I had to go through my own channels to help Erdi recoup the goods at a reasonable price.
Crazy Captain?
Klein first found the title familiar before recalling where he had heard it before.
According to Red-Haired Helene, Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's delivery of slaves for the Demonist sect was passed off to Crazy Captain Connors Victor. The latter appeared to have close connections with many of the slave dealers and merchants in the Lowen Kingdom. And this was tied to the truth behind the human disappearances in the colonies, as well as the underlying reason of the Great Smog of Backland. I've always been trying to investigate this matter. Back when I attacked Tracy, that was half the reason, but unfortunately, I didn't succeed. Later, I was busy acting for the digesting of the potion and my search for mermaids, so I temporarily abandoned my investigations.
Klein's thoughts raced as he asked without a perturbed look.
Where's Crazy Captain now?
Erdi's already gotten back his goods.
Elland hissed, emphasizing that the matter had been settled.
Where's Connors Victor now?
Elland shook his head in exasperation.
I've no idea, but his subordinates are still in Bayam trying to gather intelligence. As you know, Admiral Emirius has returned to Backland, and he's been replaced by Admiral Davis. Many changes are in place, so the pirates need to have a new handle of the latest situation. Therefore, I guess that Connors' ship is docked in the shadows of one of the nearby islands, but that's a guess with no way to confirm.
After listening in silence with his hands clasped, Klein said,
Thank you.
Elland exhaled and looked out the window as his expression rapidly turned solemn.
I came here today to tell you that you're too eye-catching. The higher-ups are beginning to pay attention to you. A powerhouse that can easily kill Kirkais wouldn't be ignored. It's best you stop using this identity for checking in. Otherwise, you might face some difficult problems.
Klein nodded seriously and said,
All right.
He was very grateful for Captain Elland's warning, but he didn't show it on his face. After Elland left, Klein immediately changed his appearance, switched ins, and confirmed that he wasn't tracked by the military. After doing all of that, he began considering the search for Crazy Captain Connors Victor. To others, this was an extremely difficult task, but Klein had a trick up his sleeve. It was to use the sea god's scepter and communicate with nearby sea creatures. As long as Connors Victor was in the Rorstead Archipelago's waters, there was no way he could hide from Klein. Of course, it was necessary that he had enough time to perform the search. Chapter 710, Plan. Above the gray fog, Klein extended his hand and summoned the sea god's scepter from the junk pile. He began browsing through the countless points of light swirling about the sealed artifact. Every point of light corresponded to a believer's prayer. The glows swirled with ethereal holiness. Soon, Klein did a preliminary screening as he focused on the waters instead of the archipelago. After he had isolated the sea god's scepter above the gray fog, he was unable to directly use the divine artifact to sense the surrounding waters and do anything effective. He had to rely on the scenes of his believers, prayers as a foundation before reaching out 5 nautical miles to influence the corresponding undersea creatures. Klein emanated his spirituality and touched one of the specks of light. He saw a native performing his daily prayers in the evening on a fishing boat before docking. As Klein's thoughts changed, the angle of the scene quickly drew higher as more dark clouds and undulating waves appeared in the scene.
There are signs of a storm brewing hours ahead? That's right. I did find the atmosphere repressing when I was out. That's why Elland said that Crazy Captain Connors' ship is likely to be hiding in the shadows of some island. It was to avoid the storm.
Klein tapped the edge of the modeled table as he muttered silently. Having deduced this, it made his search much easier. This was because he didn't need to search the extensive waters. All he needed to do was focus on the different islands around those waters. With a change in thought, a blue gem at the tip of the sea god's scepter in Klein's hand lit up. On the waters, which no longer had the fishing boat, the crimson moonlight shone down on the deep blue waves that were slowly rising. Suddenly, splashes silently surged upwards as an exaggerated eye looking up into the sky surfaced. Beneath the eye was a massive silhouette. At the same time, all kinds of fish began surfacing nearby. They took in the indistinct halo that came scattering down, and they circled around before swimming down and headed in different directions. 10 seconds later, the waters in a 5 nautical mile radius returned to its previous state. The deep blue waves rose up to a high height again, awaiting the final eruption.
Phew, this is a little draining.
Klein raised his left hand to rub his temple. He wasn't only simply commandeering the sea creatures, he had also bestowed them with remnant beyonder spirituality to a certain degree. It allowed them to transmit the scenes they saw by praying after they discovered any docked ships around the island. This wasn't too difficult or complicated for the sea god's scepter, but it was burdensome and draining for the controller Klein. Then, Klein selected a few praying believers situated on different islands around the archipelago. He then used the same method to command the sea creatures of the region. After doing all of this, he didn't bother throwing the sea god's scepter into the junk pile before returning to the real world. He took off his coat and collapsed into bed. Having expended his spirituality to the limit, he believed that he would fall asleep immediately. Yet, his head began aching, preventing him from opening his eyes or falling asleep. Klein could clearly feel that his skin seemed overly sensitive. Lumps grew over his skin, and hidden beneath them were countless meat tendrils. Indeed, as Mr. Hanged Man said, if you drain your spirituality to 0 for 2 consecutive days, you'll definitely start hearing things and show signs of losing control.
My body became a little abnormal just from reaching my limits once, despite not even maintaining it for too long. Of course, it's because I've only recently advanced, and I haven't digested much. Furthermore, there's the excess from the potions from the prior sequences.
Klein regained his train of thought as he attempted to cogitate the stacked spherical light so as to calm the fatigue of his body and mind. Having gradually recovered, he finally fell asleep. By the time he woke up, it was in the middle of the night, Haki Falaim Zachi Elland. At that moment, the winds were howling outside. The rain was pouring as the storm had finally unleashed its might after a prolonged period of brewing. And this wasn't a rare situation in Bayam. Apart from that, the night was relatively serene. Klein went to the washroom to clear his bowels. Washing his hands and taking 4 steps counterclockwise, he once again appeared above the gray fog. He picked up the sea god's scepter on the end of the long bronze table and began browsing through the scenes from the sea creatures. The scenes were that of ships, all located at different ports, harbors, or the shadows of different islands. Although Klein hadn't seen crazy Captain Connors Victor, he had previously learned of his traits and the various emblems of his pirate crew. Therefore, he wasn't afraid of failing to identify him. Scenes flashed past as he patiently scrutinized the details of the ships. About 10 minutes later, a look of unconcealed joy appeared in his eyes. He zoomed in on a scene as he pulled the orientation of the scene closer. He had found the suspected ship. The ship was docked at the back of Simim Island, an island furthest from the Rorstad archipelago. Behind it was a towering cliff with churning waves below it. Its sails and flag had been reefed up, but there was a white skull emblem with an eye patch on the 2 sides of the ship. This was none other than the emblem of the crazy captain's pirate crew. Klein removed the spirit pendulum from his left wrist and made a confirmation with divination. The answer made him rejoice, as it was indeed Connors Victor's ship. And Crazy Captain only had 1 ship.
It's no wonder that despite most adventurers at sea knowing that Crazy Captain is in contact with the kingdom's human traffickers and slave merchants, the Church of Storms' investigations of the colony disappearances didn't point to him. He only has a bounty of 3,300 pounds, The pirate crew only has one ship, so it just looks like it's a small business. It's impossible for him to do large-scale human trafficking. What should I do next?
Klein first sighed silently before considering his angle of investigation. His first reaction was to summon a massive undersea creature, hitch a ride on something akin to a whale, and head straight for Samim Island while the storm continued. Then he could infiltrate and use his powers as a marionettist to control crazy Captain Connors Victor without causing too much of a stir. But on careful thought, he felt that it was a rash decision. It wasn't a problem dealing with other pirates who weren't at the pirate admiral level, but since crazy Captain Connors Victor was involved with a terrifying matter like the Great Smog of Backland, he had to consider that Connors' normal actions were just a disguise. In consideration of how he might have another identity, with the ship concealing some secrets, there was a high chance that there was a trap that could deal with pirate admirals. Klein might not walk out alive despite being armed to the teeth if he made such a rash infiltration attempt.
Should I summon myself and head over with the Sea God Scepter as a spirit body? This can avoid some accidents, as I can immediately end the summoning if anything goes wrong. However, the Sea God Scepter is essentially the Beyonder characteristic of a high-sequence Beyonder from the Storm Pathway. As long as it appears in the real world, it might attract Sea King John Cotman. This will prevent the situation from developing as I expect it to.
Klein looked at the storm in the scene as he came up with a preliminary plan. Before that, he conjured a pen and paper and wrote the divination statement. Dealing with Connors Victor is very dangerous. Picking up the silver chain of the spirit pendulum, Klein reined in his thoughts and focused on the divination. Soon, he opened his eyes to see the topaz pendant turning clockwise at a high frequency and large amplitudes. This meant that dealing with Connors Victor was very dangerous.
It's as I expected. Thankfully, I didn't rashly rush over.
Klein picked up the Sea God Scepter and decided on executing the plan he had just thought of. It was to use the prayer scene and strike Connors Victor's ship with the Sea God Scepter from afar by using the cover of the storm. He would rouse the nest and force out its secret. After grasping the relevant situation, he would end the attacks before Sea King John Cotman sensed the abnormality or arrived at the scene. Klein wouldn't feel disappointed if Connors Victor unfortunately landed in the hands of the Sea King. This was because he would have to think of the means to pass the information to the three churches after he figured out the truth of the Great Smog of Backland. If Crazy Captain successfully escaped, Klein would have pried into his secrets by rousing the nest. He could then subsequently formulate a plan of attack.
Phew.
Klein slowly exhaled as he watched the ship bob about with the dark, crashing waves before raising the Sea God's scepter high in the air. At the tip of the scepter, the blue gems that circled around it had begun to emit a bright light.